Lee Min-ho was mid-conversation when Song Hye-kyo walked into the room, and his face did something that 2 decades of professional training could not prevent, and that every person in the Min-kyo fandom who watched the footage will carry with them for a very long time. He did not see her walk in. He was turned the other direction, fully engaged with whoever was speaking to him, giving that conversation the particular quality of present attention that he brings to professional interactions, the warm, focused, entirely competent social engagement of someone who has been navigating rooms full of important people since his early 20s, and has long since mastered the specific art of making whoever he is speaking to feel like the most relevant person in his immediate world. He was doing that. And then something shifted in the atmosphere of the room. Some change in the quality of the air, some subtle reorganization of the energy of the space that his body registered before his mind had processed its source. And his face changed. Not dramatically. Not with the visible jolt of someone who has just been surprised by something unexpected. With something quieter and more involuntary than surprise. A softening. A specific warmth that moved through his expression from the inside out, beginning somewhere behind the eyes and traveling forward until it reached the surface of his face and settled there as a smile that he did not choose and could not have stopped, and that told everyone watching it exactly what had just walked through the door before he had even turned around to confirm it. He turned. She was there. And the smile that had been building through the anticipation of her arrival completed itself in the specific, unhurried, fully present way that smiles complete themselves when they are responding to something that the heart recognizes before the eyes have finished confirming it. That is the moment. That is what this is about. Like this video right now before we go a single sentence further. Subscribe to this channel and switch on every available notification because the Min-kyo story is moving through a phase of visibility right now that the most devoted and the most patient observers of this relationship have been waiting years for. And every piece of what is surfacing in this season connects to the others in ways that only reward continuous and committed attention. You cannot experience this the same way if you arrive late. You have to be here as it unfolds. Now let us go all the way into the smile that Lee Min-ho could not hide when Song Hye-kyo walked into the room, into what that specific involuntary response reveals about the interior of a marriage that has been built almost entirely out of public sight, into why the smile matters more than any prepared statement either of them has ever made about their relationship, and into what it means for the Min-kyo story that the most privately guarded couple in Korean entertainment keeps producing these moments of unguarded truth that no amount of careful management can fully prevent. The first thing that needs to be understood about what happened is the specific nature of the involuntary. Because the word involuntary gets used loosely sometimes in ways that flatten its meaning, and this moment deserves the full weight of what the word actually contains. An involuntary response is not simply a response that was not planned. It is a response that could not have been planned or prevented because it originates in a place that deliberate management does not have access to. The body's honest layer. The layer that operates below the continuous, sophisticated, highly practiced management of self-presentation that public figures at Lee Min-ho's level maintain as a baseline condition of their professional existence. This layer does not respond to instructions. It does not follow protocols or observe the careful calculations about what to show and what to withhold that the managed layer performs with such consistent, polished competence. It simply responds to what is real, to what matters, to the specific people and things and moments that have been so thoroughly absorbed into a person's interior life that the body has developed its own responses to them. Responses that precede awareness and outpace control and surface through the managed layer whether or not the managed layer has consented to their appearance. Lee Min-ho's smile when Song Hye-kyo walked into the room came from that layer. This is not an interpretation. It is a structural observation about the mechanics of what the footage shows. The smile arrived before he turned. Before his eyes confirmed what his body had already registered. The sequence of the footage is unambiguous on this point, and the Min-kyo fandom's analysis of it has been appropriately precise. The change in his expression preceded the turn, which means it preceded the visual confirmation of her presence, which means it was not a response to seeing her but a response to knowing she was there, to the specific quality of shift in the room's atmosphere that her arrival produced in the ambient environment, and that his body, attuned to her presence with a deep, practiced, continuously operational attunement of someone who has shared a private life with her for years, recognized. immediately and accurately, and responded to before the response had been reviewed by any layer of conscious management. This is the body knowing what the mind has not yet been told. This is the accumulated intimacy of a long and genuine partnership expressing itself in the most unfiltered form available, which is the physical response that happens before thought. The smile itself, once it arrived in full, had a quality that the Min-kyo fandom has been attempting to describe with precision across the many analysis threads that the footage has generated, and the descriptions keep converging on a cluster of words that are individually insufficient but collectively begin to approach it. Unguarded is the first word. Not the polished, camera-aware expression of warmth that Lee Min-ho deploys expertly in professional contexts. The smile that is genuine in the sense that it is not cynically performed, but that has been shaped by long practice into something that satisfies the camera without fully exposing its source. The smile in this footage had none of that shaping. It had the slightly uneven, slightly too present quality of an expression that has not been filtered through the awareness of being observed, that has arrived directly from its source without passing through the editorial layer that public life requires. Unguarded is right. But unguarded alone is not enough. The second word the analysis keeps returning to is specific. And this is the more interesting word because it points towards something that generic descriptions of someone smiling when a person they love enters a room cannot capture. The specificity of this smile, the way it was calibrated precisely to its source and not to any general category of pleasant stimulus, had a quality that is only produced by a very particular kind of knowing. The knowing of someone who has been present with another person across enough seasons and enough moods and enough ordinary shared days that the sight of them, even in a room they have just entered, even from across a social distance, lands with a specific weight of all that accumulated presence. The smile was not a general positive response to a positive stimulus. It was a specific response to a specific person whose specific presence in a room he was already occupying registered in his body as something that changed the quality of that room entirely. You can only smile that specifically at someone you know that specifically. And you can only know someone that specifically through the kind of continuous, genuine, fully invested shared life that takes years to build and that lives almost entirely in private. The third word is tender. Not a word that appears often in the vocabulary of Min-kyo analysis because the relationship does not offer many opportunities to use it with precision. Tender requires a specific quality of softness in an expression that goes beyond warmth and beyond happiness and into something more vulnerable, more interior, more genuinely exposed. Tenderness in an expression is the visible surface of care that has been present for long enough and been exercised consistently enough that it has become structural, has become part of how a person orients toward the object of the care rather than simply an emotion that visits and departs. The smile that Lee Min-ho could not hide when Song Hye-kyo walked into the room had that quality. The quality of someone whose feelings for another person have been lived with long enough that they have become part of the furniture of the interior, present always, not as a constant emotional peak but as a continuous baseline warmth that surfaces into visibility whenever the person who produced it arrives in the shared space. Song Hye-kyo crossed the room toward him. This is the next movement in the footage, and it is worth examining with the same precision as the smile because it carries its own layer of the story. She moved through the space between the door and where he was standing with the specific quality of someone who knows exactly where they are going and is not performing the journey for anyone watching it. Not the careful, socially calibrated navigation of a very famous woman moving through a room full of people who are aware of her presence. The particular quality of movement that public visibility requires, and that she has mastered across decades of inhabiting rooms where everyone knows who she is. Something more direct than that. More private. The quality of movement that people have when they are going toward a specific person who is already home to them, when the space between them is not a social negotiation but simply a physical distance to be closed. She walked toward him the way you walk toward the person you came to be with, through and past everything else in the room, with the unself-conscious directness of someone for whom his specific location in the space has been the primary coordinate of the room since the moment she entered it. The reunion, when it happened, was not large. This is one of the most significant and most telling things about the entire sequence of footage. Two people at their level of cultural visibility and professional accomplishment, reuniting in a room full of people who are very much aware of both of them, could have made this moment into a statement. Could have allowed the natural theater of the setting to amplify what was already theatrically available in the situation. The smile that had already surfaced, the directness of her crossing the room, the visible quality of connection between them that the room had already registered and was already responding to. All of this existed as raw material for a larger, more legible, more publicly satisfying version of the moment. They did not make it larger. They made it quieter. The reunion had the specifically private quality of two people who have been reuniting in various rooms for long enough that the reunion itself has become unremarkable in the best possible sense, has become simply the ordinary restoration of the primary condition of their shared life, which is being in the same space. The warmth of it was real and visible. The intimacy of it was unmistakable. But the scale of it was private. Sized for them, not for the room. And that sizing, that deliberate or instinctive calibration of the moment to its actual rather than its performative dimensions, told the watching fandom more about the depth and the settledness and the genuine maturity of this marriage than any larger gesture could have. The room noticed. This is the detail that the witness accounts, which began circulating through the fandom alongside the footage analysis, kept returning to. The people present in that room, who were themselves navigating the particular social complexity of a space full of important industry figures and the continuous low-level performance of presence that such spaces require, paused. Not obviously. Not in the broad theatrical way that a room pauses when something dramatic happens. In the specific, almost subliminal way that a room pauses when something true surfaces unexpectedly through the constructed social surface of a professional gathering, when something real and private and not meant for the room briefly becomes visible to the room, and the room, encountering it, does not quite know what to do with it. People nearby found their conversations momentarily lose their thread, found their attention briefly pulled by something they could not immediately name toward the specific point in the room where Lee Min-ho's smile had completed itself and Song Hye-kyo had arrived to meet it. Found themselves, for a beat, simply witnesses to something that had not been offered to them, and that they had not asked for, and that, having been briefly present in their awareness, left something behind when it passed. This is what genuine intimacy does in rooms designed for managed social interaction. It creates a disturbance. Not a disruptive one, not the kind that reorganizes the room and becomes the event itself, but a quiet one. A ripple. The specific quality of disturbance that the real thing produces when it surfaces through the constructed surface of a professional environment, the quality that makes people nearby briefly lose the thread of what they were doing because something else, something with a different frequency and a different weight and a different quality of presence than everything else in the room, has briefly occupied the space. The ripple that moved through the room when Lee Min-ho smiled at the door before he turned to see who had walked through it was that kind of disturbance. The people who felt it did not discuss it in the moment. They simply returned to their conversations, slightly altered, carrying something they could not have articulated but that the body had registered and would not entirely release. The significance of this moment within the Min-kyo narrative is layered in ways that require unpacking at different depths. At the surface level, the most immediate level, it is significant because it is beautiful. Because watching a person smile before they have even turned to conclusion is not complicated. It is not ambiguous. It does not require sophisticated interpretive frameworks or the specialized vocabulary of body language analysis, or any expertise beyond the basic human capacity to recognize genuine feeling when it is made briefly visible. The conclusion is simply that what Lee Min-ho and Song Hye-kyo have built together in private is as real and as deep and as fully, richly alive as the most attentive observers of this relationship have been arguing it is across all the seasons of its mostly silent existence. The smile is the latest piece of proof. The clearest single piece, in some ways because of how involuntary it was, because of how completely it preceded the managed layer and surfaced from somewhere that management does not reach. There is a specific kind of happiness that is easy to miss because it does not announce itself. Because it does not dress up in the vocabulary of romantic declaration or express itself in the dramatic gestures that popular culture has trained us to recognize as love. It is the happiness that has settled, that has moved through the early phases of intensity and discovery, and the high-relief emotional landscape of a new relationship into something quieter and deeper and more permanently present. The happiness that has become the background condition of a life, rather than an occasional state that visits and departs. This kind of happiness shows up in small things, in the specific quality of a smile that precedes the arrival of its cause. In the way a room changes for a person when one specific other person enters it. in the unhurried directness of someone crossing a room toward the person they came to be with, in the calibration of a reunion to its private rather than its public dimensions, in all the small, involuntary, unperformable signs of a life that has been genuinely, thoroughly, completely shared with another person and that has been made, by that sharing, into something that could not exist in its current form without both of them inside it. Knew before he turned. Lee Min-ho's smile when Song Hye-kyo walked into the room was a sign of that happiness. Not a performance of it. Not a demonstration of it for an audience that happened to be watching. The thing itself, briefly and accidentally made visible in the half-second before the managed layer could intercept it and decide what to do with it. The thing itself, arriving in his face from a place that professional training does not reach, from the deep, settled, fully inhabited private life that these two people have been building together in the space the world has never been allowed inside. The smile was not for the room. The smile was for her, produced by her, caused by nothing more and nothing less than the specific quality of shift in the world that her arrival in a shared space produces in the body of a man who has been living his private life alongside hers for long enough that her presence has become as necessary to the texture of his days as anything else he has learned to depend on. She walked in. His face. And the smile that the whole room noticed, and that no amount of professional management could prevent, was not a small thing dressed in small clothing. It was the largest thing available. It was the whole truth of a marriage that has been lived in private, surfacing for one unguarded, involuntary, luminously honest moment through the surface of a very public room. Visible to everyone. Belonging entirely to one person. The person who had just walked through the door. If this reached somewhere you were not expecting to be reached, come into the comments and tell us what the smile did to you when you saw it for the first time. Tell us the specific moment in the footage where it landed hardest. Tell us what it feels like to have years of patient attention rewarded by something this clear and this honest and this completely, obviously real. Share this with every person in your life who has been following the Min-kyo story and who deserves to have this moment held up in the light it deserves and examined with the care it carries. Subscribe to this channel and keep every notification active because the season the Min-kyo story is in right now is producing revelations at a pace and a depth that this relationship has not shown before, and every single one of them deserves to be witnessed in real time by people who understand the full weight of what they are looking at. Stay close. Stay present. The story keeps arriving. And it keeps being worth the wait.